Dear colleagues and EIF members, it is an honor and a privilege to have Vice President Vestager with us this evening. I am sure you all agree that she holds a critical portfolio for Europe's global competitiveness, and that her experience for over the past 7 years is unquestionable. I would also add that her willingness to participate and explain the Commission views and proposal is equally unquestionable. I must say that this is a great quality for a Vice Presidency with such a horizontal and productive portfolio. Indeed, if we look at the last 3 months, the Commission has presented very important files such as the Data Governance Regulation, the Digital Service Act, the Digital Market Act, and only last week, the Communication Europe's Digital Decade, that can be considered sort of new digital agenda for the next 10 years. Be it compatibility of data governance proposal with the principle that there is no obligation to store, process, and data in the EU, be it the debate on service interoperability that the DSA has sparked, or the questions emerging from the new regulatory regime, not entirely under competition law, that the DMA builds. Today we have the best possible speaker. So we are immediately to start, but let me say before that following the Vice President's speech, the EIF General Director, Maria Rosa Ghibellini, will moderate the Q&A session with my colleagues, MEPs. Dear Vice President, on behalf of the EIF, thank you very much, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Pilar, for such a warm welcome, and thank you for inviting me today. I think it's a special honor to be with you in the month where the European Internet Forum celebrates its 21st anniversary. A lot of things can happen in 21 years. It used to be considered sort of the age of maturity, the time for a child to become a real responsible adult. But the world has speeded up since then. And even though the internet is, give or take, the same age as the forum, it has changed our world in a very, very profound way. In an interview with the BBC just a year earlier, it was in 1999, no less a person than David Bowie, he said that the world was, and I quote, on the cusp of something exhilarating and terrifying, end of quote. And when he said that, his interviewer looked at him with scorn. But of course, as the founders of this forum really understood, the world was about to be transformed. In those 21 years, the internet has become the first place we go to connect the world and connect with the world. It runs through our lives as blood vessels through a body. Sometimes large and obvious, sometimes small and in the background, but always not far away. And in the last year, as the coronavirus have kept us physically apart, digital technology has stepped in to fill that gap, helping us to study and to work, to shop, to stay in touch with friends in a way that simply could not have been possible if the pandemic had struck just 1 or 2 decades earlier. So Bowie was right. But even he couldn't foresee everything. In the same interview, he also talked about the way that monopolies didn't seem to have much power on the internet. Well, and 2 decades ago, that view, of course, made a lot of sense. This new technology let data flow so freely that it hardly seemed possible for anyone to control it. Obviously, all of that has changed. The giants of the internet has worked out how to turn those huge flows of data to their favor. And as the internet has become an important and central part of our lives, their power to control the information about us also becomes the power over the way our economies and our societies work. Today, the privacy of millions of people is at stake if a big platform lets someone harvest our data without our consent. The way Cambridge Analytica harvested data through Facebook. Today, the decisions that big platforms make about how to rank different sellers in search results, or how to use the data that they collect about their users, that have a huge influence on the faith of millions of businesses which rely on those platforms to connect with their customers. And today, the decisions that digital platforms make about which voices to ban or not to ban from their platforms, that can have huge effects on our democratic choices. They can determine who gets to be heard in the debate. They can even, as we saw in the US Capitol in January, affect the success or failure of movements that try to violently overthrow democracy. The rules we have today, like the e-commerce directive, of course, they have helped to make the internet a free and open space with room for businesses to innovate, for businesses to grow. But as the power of digital platforms has grown as well, it has become increasingly clear that we need something more. We need more to keep that power in check, to keep our digital world open and fair. And the proposals that we put forward in December for a Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act aim to fill that gap. The Digital Services Act will make platforms throughout Europe more responsible for their decisions that affect our safety and our democracy. They will have to quickly remove dangerous goods and illegal content from their platforms, while also protecting users' freedom of expression by giving them effective way to contest that removal. They have to tell us how the algorithm works on what information to show us, helping us to judge whether we will trust or not the things that we find online. Meanwhile, the Digital Markets Act is designed to make our digital markets open and fair for consumers and for businesses of all sizes, with a clear list of do's and don'ts for digital gatekeepers, a list that they will have to comply with. Of course, we haven't plucked this list of obligations out of thin air. They are based on a careful assessment of the evidence as to how these markets work, and how the actions of gatekeepers can stop them from working well. And one of those sources of information has been the things that we have learned about those markets as we have enforced the competition rules. Take our investigation of the way that Google used the power of its search engine to favor its own shopping comparison service. That wasn't just an important competition case. It also lifted the lid on the way that gatekeepers can undermine fair and open markets when they prefer their own services ahead of rivals. Like Google, many gatekeepers, they would play a dual role as both a player and referee. They control a platform that businesses rely on in order to connect with their customers. And at the same time, they compete with those customers. or those businesses. So it's really easy for them to use the power of the platform to give their own services a head start over their rivals. And other evidence confirm that some types of this sort of self-preferencing can be problematic. When we consulted on rules to make sure our digital platforms treat businesses fairly, well, those businesses told us that self-preferencing by platforms is one of the most sort of common problems that they face. And last year, when the Judiciary Committee of the US House of Representatives published its major reports on digital competition, it included pages of evidence of how certain platforms engage in this behavior. Dealing with competition cases have also helped us give some valuable insights as to how, as on the way that consumers use the technology, and how reality can be very different from theory. Companies like Microsoft and Google, they have insisted in the past that hardware makers which pre-install their operating systems also include other software made by those companies, like Internet Explorer in the Microsoft case, or apps like Google Search and Chrome for devices that uses Android. Obviously, pre-installation of software isn't bad in itself. Most of us like to be able to use the new PC, the new mobile phone straight out of the box. And in principle, it is easy for us as users to shop around to find better apps than the one that has been pre-installed. It's easy, but the thing is, it doesn't happen in practice, at least not very much. In a number of our cases, we have seen that users are far more likely to stick with the app that was on the device when they bought it. Especially, of course, if they have no way to uninstall that app. So when gatekeepers don't allow users to remove those apps, it makes it even harder for rivals to have a chance to compete. Our experience has also shown us how big platforms can close down a market when they tie their suppliers with so-called most favored nation clauses. But one of the things that I keep reminding myself is that the Digital Markets Act is not a competition law instrument in the sense that it doesn't affect the competition rules, the fact that competition rules apply in digital markets, nor does it change our powers. Or the powers of Europe's national competition authorities to enforce those rules in a digital world. And that is quite important. Instead, the Digital Markets Act is designed to complement the competition rules. And as you'd expect, it means that it will work in a very different way. The treaty rules on competition, well, they set out broad principles as to how companies should behave, avoid harming consumers. Principles that we enforce through detailed investigations in individual cases. The Digital Markets Act, on the other hand, sets out in advance, in black and white, exactly what the gatekeeper's obligations are. Our competition cases and market studies, they have identified recurrent behavior that are bad for fair and open markets. And so far we have intervened after the behavior was put in place, which can take time. But it is only with the experience that we have now that we are able to identify those behavior that should be banned or imposed by the regulation. So the Digital Markets Act certainly won't mean that we stop enforcing the competition rules in digital markets. But in the future, we will be doing it in a new context, in markets that are much more strictly regulated than before. And of course, we are already enforcing the competition rules in many regulated sectors, in energy and banking, pharmaceuticals and transport. But for digital market, this is going to be a change. And that, of course, will affect the kind of competition cases that we're going to deal with in the future. You could think of our work as a competition authority as being a bit like sort of cleaning up the rubbish that has been dumped in a river to keep it flowing smoothly and well. And with the Digital Markets Act, it's rather as though a sort of filter has been installed a little sort of way upstream, which will remove some of the debris before it gets to us. That will not change our powers, but its presence does mean that we don't have to deal with the same problems in the future. It means some kind of behavior simply won't reach us because the Act will make sure that those things don't happen. But of course, the issues that remain in digital markets and elsewhere will still keep us busy in the years to come. So to conclude, the competition rules and the Digital Markets Act will work together in harmony, helping our digital markets to work better for everyone. And that's the way it should be. The digital transition is reshaping our entire lives. And no set of rules will make sure that these changes happens in a way that put people first. So the Digital Markets Act and the Digital Services Act are just parts of our work to deliver a positive future for Europeans. Just last week, as an example, we put forward our vision to make the 2020s Europe's digital decade. And that vision will include a clear statement on the principles of a fair digital society with opportunities for everyone. It will also include a digital compass that will set out exactly what we will do and when to build a greener, a more digital, a more resilient economy. But the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act, they are vital parts of the puzzle because they deal with a particularly fundamental task, bringing the power of digital platforms back under democratic control. And it's urgent that we do this fast, because that power can harm our markets and our democracies in ways that aren't always easy or maybe not even possible to fix. So I've been really delighted to see in the meetings I recently have had with parliamentary committees and the groups, and I know many of you are present here today, how committed members of parliament are to get these rules in place really quickly. So now is the moment, and I guess Bowie would have put it that way, when you can be heroes. I'm confident that very soon, with new rules in place, we can make sure that our democracies, and not just a handful of big platforms, will make the decisions that determine our future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now we will go to the question and answers. Maria Rosa has rejoined us. She will moderate the Q&A session, so we can start.
Yes, thank you, Pilar, and many thanks to the Vice President for her remarks. Indeed, we are ready to start with a Q&A session with some of our digital MEPs, I would say, who will join us on screen. But before we do that, I would like to reveal a little surprise we had in store for the Vice President, as our graphic designer in the backstage followed her speech and captured all the highlights, as many as he could at least. And we wanted to just give a tribute to you, Vice President, to your work.
Nice.
This is very nice. It is really very nice. What a skill to have. I get really envious of being able to do that. And in one glance, I can understand what it took me 20 minutes to tell you.
You can use it for the next.
Exactly. It will remain as a reference anyway. So glad you appreciate it.